They fought for France. They wore its uniform, marched under its flag, and defended its soil. But when the German army swept through France in 1940, these soldiers, men from Senegal, Morocco, and across Africa, were not treated as prisoners of war. They were lined up against ditches, their white officers pulled aside, and they were executed, not as soldiers, but as men of color. This is the dark reason why thousands of France's colonial troops were massacred by the SS and Wehrmacht, and why their story was buried for decades. At the dawn of World War II, France relied heavily on its colonial empire. From West Africa to North Africa, hundreds of thousands of men answered the call to defend the mère patrie, the motherland. They were known as the Tirailleurs Sénégalais, though many came from Mali, Guinea, Chad, and beyond. Others were Moroccan goumiers, Algerian infantrymen, and even Indian volunteers fighting under the British flag. These men were promised honor, pay, and citizenship after victory. For most, France was not home. It was an idea. Many had never seen Paris or Lyon. They carried family charms from Dakar, Bamako, or Marrakech, and wrote letters home about snow, strange food, and comrades who treated them as equals, or didn't. They fought believing loyalty could erase the color line. History would prove them wrong. They were often the first to face the German advance when France fell in May 1940. In mud-soaked fields and burning villages, they resisted until their ammunition ran out. But surrender did not bring mercy. For the Nazi ideology, their very existence, black men in European uniform, was an unforgivable insult. One of the most infamous moments came near the village of Chasselay, just outside Lyon. After fierce fighting, a group of Senegalese tirailleurs ran out of ammunition and raised their hands to surrender. Their French officers stepped forward, unarmed, believing the rules of war would protect them. But the German troops from the SS Totenkopf division had other orders. The white prisoners were taken away. The African soldiers were forced into a nearby field, told to dig their own graves, and then machine-gunned where they stood. Villagers later recalled hearing the bursts of gunfire, then silence, and the groans of the dying through the night. Similar horrors unfolded across France, and dozens more massacres followed, each following the same chilling pattern. The line between enemy and race had vanished. At Erquinvillas, prisoners were marched to a quarry and machine-gunned. In Clamecy, villagers found corpses bound with wire, and in Airaines, over 100 colonial troops were killed after surrendering. Eyewitnesses spoke of officers begging to be shot with their men. One German sergeant later admitted, "It was not war, it was cleansing." These scattered killings formed a hidden front, one fought in shadows without reports or trials. The executions weren't spontaneous. They were the product of years of racist propaganda. After World War I, Nazi leaders had obsessed over the so-called Black Shame on the Rhine, Germany's humiliation at the hands of French colonial troops who occupied the Rhineland. To Hitler, this was unforgivable. He called those soldiers half-apes and defilers of Europe. By 1939, Nazi ideology was clear. Non-white soldiers fighting for a European nation were racial traitors, and executing them wasn't seen as a crime, but as restoring racial order. When the SS and Wehrmacht met black soldiers in battle, they didn't see opponents. They saw the embodiment of what Nazi doctrine most feared: equality between races under the same flag. So when those men surrendered, the bullets that followed weren't about war, they were about ideology. For the perpetrators, these murders also carried a twisted psychology. The Nazis had built their self-image on racial superiority. Yet the sight of African troops calmly manning French artillery or capturing German patrols tore that illusion apart. Killing them was a way to erase humiliation. The same soldiers who saluted Hitler's speeches on purity now wiped away their own fear with gunfire. Eyewitnesses described chilling scenes. In one village, a priest begged the German commander to spare the prisoners. He was told, "These are not men. These are animals in uniform." In another, a handful of tirailleurs were forced to run, hunted down with rifles for sport. Members of the SS Totenkopf and Grossdeutschland divisions documented these killings in letters home. They bragged that the Negroes were dealt with swiftly. French civilians later buried the bodies secretly at night, knowing that even the act of giving these men a grave could bring punishment. When Allied troops liberated France in 1944, they discovered makeshift cemeteries, rows of unmarked mounds where the fallen colonial soldiers lay. The graves told the truth no report could hide. Few of the German officers responsible were ever tried. Most claimed they were following orders, or that chaos prevented them from intervening. But for decades, silence did what bullets began. The massacres were quietly omitted from textbooks, and the names of the victims were lost among casualty lists labeled simply missing. Survivors returned to colonies where medals meant little and pensions were half what white veterans received. Some, decades later, still carried German bullet fragments in their legs, proof of loyalty no one asked to see. France rebuilt, but remembrance was selective. For decades, the names of these African soldiers were missing from official ceremonies and schoolbooks. At Chasselay, local villagers built their own memorial, the Tirailleurs Sénégalais Cemetery, a mosaic-walled resting place for the fallen men of Africa. It stands today as both a graveyard and a question. Why did it take half a century for their sacrifice to be acknowledged by the country they died defending? Only in recent years have French presidents laid wreaths there, admitting at last that these men were massacred not as soldiers, but as victims of racial hatred. In recent years, descendants have begun to speak. At Chasselay, school children lay flowers every June. In 2012, a French president bowed there and said, "France will never forget these sons who died for her." It was the first time the nation's leader publicly used the word massacre. 85 years late, the truth finally stood without fear. Yet even with that truth spoken, the silence of history still lingers. They died wearing France's colors, but were denied the dignity those colors promised. The SS executed them for the color of their skin, and history buried them for the same reason. Yet their courage never faded. They fought for ideals that outlived both empires and dictators: freedom, equality, and brotherhood. At Chasselay, under the red earth and African mosaics, they still stand guard in silence. A reminder that wars are not only fought with bullets, but with beliefs about who deserves to live and die. They fought for freedom, but they were never granted humanity. If you believe their story deserves to be remembered, share it. And if you want to hear more untold stories from the hidden corners of history, subscribe to this channel and never miss a future episode.